For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge. Hi there, Catherine. So there are so many questions about what the ultimate objective is here for Vladimir Putin. What are you hearing from your contacts about President Putin's strategy?
Elaine, I have a longtime contact who's worked with U.S. Special Forces as well as in the intelligence world, and they are based out of Ukraine, and they told me they believe that President Putin wants to extend his footprint in the eastern part of the country and use the Donbass as a springboard to destabilize Ukraine with the goal that the current government there would be replaced and there would be a new pro-Russian regime acting in that capacity. And he told me that this is preferable to any kind of conventional invasion because Putin understands that a conventional invasion would be extremely expensive militarily, the cost in terms of human lives, and then also the time commitment that it would take to achieve.
So what about this discussion of sanctions? First of all, the current sanctions against Russia, how significantly are they actually impacting President Putin?
Well, based on this contact's reporting to me, he described this first wave of sanctions that were focused on this eastern region called the Donbass as very weak, and in his words, a, quote, invitation for further aggression by the Russian President Vladimir Putin. This next wave that's been announced, which is more specifically targeted at Russian institutions, the banks, the military, individuals close to the Russian president, he saw as more effective. But the ultimate weapon here really is something called the SWIFT banking system. And denying the Russians access to it would leave them economically isolated. And a senior administration official told reporters today that as long as this aggression continues, that no Russian financial institution is safe.
Well, Catherine, what are you learning about Russia's cyber retaliation efforts? We know that the cyber space is one that the Russians have used in their previous attacks before now. What do we know at this moment?
Well, in recent days, CBS News has obtained an intelligence assessment from the New York Police Department. They have their own intelligence bureau, and what they found is that there really is a higher risk of cyber retaliation as the diplomacy has failed between the U.S., the West, and Russia. And it said a likely cyber attack would target critical infrastructure, so think of things like banking, as well as law enforcement, and it would likely be done by pro-Russian groups or criminal entities. This would give Moscow plausible deniability, and it would also allow these groups to curry favor with Vladimir Putin for future operations.
Well, Catherine, talk to us about American citizens who could be drawn into a possible conflict in Ukraine.
Well, there's a second assessment from the NYPD, and based on my experience covering this for 2 decades, the NYPD intelligence unit is often at the tip of the spear in terms of identifying these threat trends, and they talk about the possibility, even the likelihood, that Americans will travel overseas to engage in the conflict in eastern Ukraine as a way to test their battle skills, so becoming a type of American foreign fighter in the region. And if you think back just a decade, this is exactly the same pattern we saw with radicalized Americans to al-Qaeda and ISIS when they traveled to Syria to, again, practice these battle skills to ultimately bring them back to this country.
It's disturbing to hear that, Catherine, and I wonder, has there been any kind of profile yet put together of the kind of American that would go ahead and travel and engage in what you just laid out there?
Well, they talk. First of all, they're not seeing evidence of this travel at this point, but they're very concerned about the possibility of this happening, and they point to groups that are largely associated on the far right taking this opportunity to travel overseas and to practice these skills.
Well, how difficult is it, Catherine, to make sense of the intelligence actually coming out of Russia?
This was a part of the conversation, Elaine, that really caught my attention. If you step back and you think about the toolbox that the Russian president has, one of his greatest tools are these influence operations. And my contact said that he was concerned that in addition to this troop buildup, the Russians had set up what he called disinformation channels. Remember, disinformation is information that you know to be false, but you put it out there in order to trick people into bad decision-making. And his concern is that the Russians have had this disinformation influence operation in the hope that we are picking up this information and we're using these errors to factor into our decision-making and to really complicate that process.
Really a sobering picture that you're painting here from your contacts in the intelligence community. Catherine Herridge for us. Catherine, as always, we thank you.
You're welcome.